Now we'll move on to the next part, that is the event delegation model, right? You can see here, there's an event which will be occurring on a component, any component which you add on the window or a frame. And when you click on it, some action must be performed. So there must be someone who can listen to that event, which you're being already pre-programmed when clicked on the particular component, right? So it will be in terms of methods, right? There might be multiple methods occurring, or a single, or a combination of. So whenever I want to have an event, I'll be using this delegation model. What this is, right? Why do we need it, right? Generally, when we create a component, that component is displayed on the screen, right? But it is not capable of doing any actions, right? So when I click it, it will just give me a 3D look and feel that it is being clicked. But after clicking, if something is happening, that part we call it as an event generation, right? So for example, if we have a push button, right, which is displayed but cannot perform anything, any action is not being performed. But even when someone clicks on it, it is just giving you a native look and feel of that operating system, whichever you are using. Right? But clicking that button is nothing but an event, right? So an event represents a specific action done on a component. Now here component can be anything except a label, right? Because a label will be just a representation of text. Remaining components will have or have not any event, right? But mostly if you're taking a component, you apply an event on it, right? There are different methods. With the listener method, we'll be seeing those methods which are being used, right? So data inside that component will be operated by mouse or by keyboard, right? By any means. So by keyword also you can operate, right? Most of the time if you go for this, you can say here, you can see a small window is there, right? If I want to select a file, what is the shortcut for it? Alt F, right? You can see here, there's an underline between each character, right? Those are called as mnemonics, technically or programmatically in Java. If you want to add some shortcuts, there's a class named as mnemonics, right? So for that mnemonics, you can add shortcuts. So if I click on this window as Alt F, there's a combination of two different keys. After pressing this on this application, an event is generated, right? Otherwise, if I press Control F, it is going for find, right? So this is one of the event. So some combinations are given for such applications so that a particular event will be generated and user will be more friendly, right? So whenever an event is generated on a particular component, the component will not know about it because it cannot listen to the event. Right? Component is just a visualization to the user, to the via the graphical user interface, right? So event will be at the background, component will be on the, you can say, on the window or on the frame, right? Now when I click on that event, for the user, the component is visible, but after clicking it, that event occurring must be listened by someone. So that is the responsibility of the event, right? So to let the component understand that the event is generated or not, we should add some listeners to the components, right? Now a listener is an interface. Basically, a listener is an interface which listens to an event coming from the component. A listener will have some, you can say, abstract methods also, which need to be implemented by the programmer or developer, right? So when an event is generated by the user on a particular component, the event is not handled by the component, whereas the component sends that event to the listener attached to it. So there must be listener. If you want some action to be performed when clicked on a component, there must be a listener, because the responsibility of the listener is to make it execute, right? The listener will not handle the event, but it's hands over the event to an appropriate method, right? Now his responsibility is to have a record of all these methods coming out from this component, right? So there will, if there are multiple methods, there might be multiple components also. So there will be multiple events also. So if I want to click on a button, button will generate an event. Button will basically be a component. So when I click on it, it will listen it. and try to see from which component an event is to be generated, and we'll call a particular method so that the action will be performed, right? So we have two different you can say parts. First as a component part and another as an action part, right? So event and component you can say as it will be in a graphical part, right? Whenever you create a GUI, the components will be placed on the frame, right? But when you click on it, when you try to interact with that component, it will not be in action, right? So to be in action, you need listeners to add to that component part, right? So listener basically is just an interface which will be dealing with these methods and back again firing to the you can say component that when clicked on this button, this action will be generated, right? Now you can say that what is this EDM, called as event delegation model? This is nothing but the model which represents that when an event is generated by the user on a component, it is delegated, right? It you can say sends or transfers to a listener interface, and then the listener calls a method in response to the event. So finally, the event is handled by that method, right? So there's a confusion between, you can say, when asked by an interviewer that what is a listener and what is an event, right? So these three are different parts, right? The basic responsibility of responding, giving a response to the component is done by these methods, but to convey a message, we need an interface, which is the listener. Now we have, you can say, many methods when creating a frame. So suppose we are creating a frame in a window, and we want to access its default buttons, right? As we have minimize, maximize, close, right? As we saw, we have to close these frames. As we saw here, two examples for my frame and my frame 2. So what do we need to do? We have to exit it from the console window by pressing Control C, right? Even though the buttons were there, they were not being executed because any action was not being given to that particular frame, right? So there are many methods in listener interface. So if I'm going to use window, there will be window listener interface, right? So there are some methods under this interface. Now, if I'm going to use interface, these methods have to be implemented, such as window is activated or not, is the window closed or not. If I'm only clicked it but not released the click, so it will be in closing state, right? Whether it is deactivated, that means whether it is minimized or not, right? De-iconified, iconified, or the window is still open or it is still active, right? So such kind of you can say multiple methods can be used for different listeners, right? Now while closing a frame, right? So a frame is also a component, right? So we need to close a frame which has been created by clicking on its close button, not programmatically from the terminal, because user won't be friendly with the terminal console, right? So if you're creating a GUI and your GUI components doesn't work, so the user won't be switching to the terminal or to the console, right? So you need to make that button in action. Whenever I'm clicking on the X button, on the close button, the window must be closed, right? So to do that, we must attach a listener to the frame component to close the window. Now, again, listeners are available in the AWT package, that is java.awt.event. These are some of the methods: window activated, window closed, window closing, window deactivated, window de-iconified, window iconified, and window opened, right? So these are the, you can say, window listener interface which calls these different methods when the frame is being closed, right? So you can think of the number of events when you just need to close a window, right? So let's see a small example on how we can try to implement all these, and we'll just give a small message, or you can say uh, whenever an event is generated, we'll drop some message on the console that amongst all these, which of these methods is being currently executed. And later on, there's one more point. So whenever I want to close a frame, I need not have to write all these methods, because if I'm going to use an interface, the default methods have to be implemented in the class, right? So just to close the frame, I do not have to implement all this. There's one more, you can say, an adapter for this, a class as window adapter, right? So we'll see with that also, and by using particularly with these all examples also. Okay, so this will be for creating all those methods. I'm not using the fully qualified name. I'll want you to let know which kind of events and sub packages are being used here. We'll go for listener also. And parallelly window listener. Set the size, the layout and the visibility. Do not want any layout, not even null. So, oh, sorry, not even flow layout, make it as null. Now we'll use those methods. First was window activated. We'll just use a simple message to display on the console so that which method we have interacted, we will get to know. Then we have window closed. Then we have window closing. Then we have windows deactivated, de-iconified. There's a pop-up for time limit. If the session ends, join again. de-iconified. Okay. I've used closed. Yeah, I used closed here. See window open now. Right now, just have a look over here. When I click on it, right, there's a message, the window is being active, it is open, right? When I minimize it, you can see it is iconified. Yeah, you can see the icon in the taskbar. I think taskbar is not visible, but it is being minimized and sent to the taskbar, so it is iconified. And right now you cannot see it on the screen, so it is deactivated. As soon as I click on the window, it is again de-iconified and the state is active, right? When I close it, now these buttons will be in a working state because we have implemented all those methods. So I click it and see closing. Then deactivated. It took a little bit time, right? So these are all the methods which we implement in for window using the window listener. Now it is not feasible that as it is an interface, we need to implement those methods, but it is not feasible just for a single frame. We need to access all those buttons. We need to uh, run all these methods, right? All these methods, right? It will be very tedious one. So what we have is uh, window adapter, right? So let's show just an example of window adapter. So you can skip all those parts and directly use window adapter. Make it visible, and we'll call upon the listener, and we'll pass a new class so that window adapter can extend it and run a closing method only, right? So to write it, right, now I'll create my class, extend in another class, and take only that method which we need to implement. Save it. We try to run it. Window listener. Okay. And you can see the same window, right? All those methods will be here, but explicitly in the previous program we have passed on a message, but here you can see there won't be a message because this is what we are using from the system. The program is exited, right? So this was a simple demonstration of you can say creating a frame and using the event delegation model